Hey everyone, welcome to today's breakdown. I am absolutely thrilled to get into this material with you today. We're going to be focusing on a highly provocative philosophical text that really challenges the very foundation of how humanity approaches worship and the divine. And look, this isn't just some surface-level critique. It is a deep, unflinching look into the psychology of faith, asking us to step back and re-examine what we're actually doing when we pray. The source material makes this compelling argument that humanity has this centuries-old thirst to reach the divine. It's kind of like a lost son who's wandering in a foreign land, suffering and desperately just wanting to return home to his wealthy father's immense estate. Yet, despite having that totally natural desire, we are completely tangled up in an illusion.
So let's just dive right into it with this incredibly striking title question. Kya hum Ishwar ko poojte hain ya shaitan ko? Which translates to, do we actually worship God or are we worshiping Satan? Now I know that is a massive, heavy, attention-grabbing question, but it's not just there for shock value. It points to a fundamental crisis. The premise here is that human beings are so trapped in this web of worldly desires and confusion that we've totally lost our sense of true identity. We don't know who we are, where we are, or what we're really supposed to be doing. And because we're in this state of profound confusion, our understanding of everything, including God, is just completely distorted. We're basically wandering around in the dark. And what we've ended up worshiping might actually be the exact opposite of the divine.
All right, let's move into Section 1. Title, Atma or Sharir Ka Brahm. Subtitle, Mistaking Our Identity.
This section brilliantly illustrates exactly where our core mistake happens. Anchoring its premise in ancient wisdom from the Bhagavad Gita, this thought process highlights a simple yet profound truth. You are not the body. Our absolute biggest fatal mistake is falsely identifying ourselves as this gross physical form rather than the subtle soul. I mean, we might hear people say, oh yeah, the soul is different from the body, but if you look around, it kind of seems like no one actually believes it deep down, right? If we truly didn't think of ourselves as just physical bodies, the world wouldn't be this giant hub of immoral behavior. Because we've forgotten our true spiritual identity, we have naturally and completely lost sight of the true nature of God as well.
There is a really sharp contrast to make here between the stula, which is the gross physical body made up of the 5 elements, and the sukshma, the subtle soul or consciousness. Think about it like this. When you eat a delicious sweet, your tongue tastes it, your stomach digests it, and eventually the waste is expelled. That entire process, it's purely physical. It literally only affects the physical elements of the gross body. The soul, because it is incredibly subtle, remains completely untouched by the bitter or the sweet. The soul just kind of observes. Physical things cannot reach the depth of the soul. It's like watching 2 buffaloes fight outside your window doesn't physically injure your body, right? In the exact same way, physical worldly experiences do not actually touch the soul.
Moving right along to Section 2. Title, Rasiko Sap Man Lena. Subtitle, Illusion of the Divine.
The crucial point here is how this illusion of our physical self completely distorts our perception of God. The text brings up the famous Indian philosophical analogy of Brahm, or illusion. Imagine you're walking outside in the pitch dark, and you see a piece of rope on the ground. Because it's dark and your vision is messed up, you mistake that rope for a deadly snake. You react with intense fear, you panic, and you completely change your behavior, all based on a totally false reality. The author argues that this is exactly what has happened with our concept of God. In the darkness of our spiritual ignorance, true knowledge just doesn't function properly. Because of this massive confusion, we've taken our own physical, fearful, worldly flaws and projected them onto the supreme consciousness. We've literally placed an illusion, a Satan, if you will, on the throne of God, and that is exactly what humanity is currently worshiping.
Okay, let's head into Section 3. Title, Bijli aur Bhautik Prakruti. Subtitle, The Impartial Divine.
I absolutely love the logic used here. It compares the impartial nature of the universe, meaning God, to an electrical current or a machine. Think about it. An electrical generator runs on absolute, unchanging laws. It just provides power. Whether you use that power to grind wheat or cut fodder is entirely up to you and your own capabilities. The electricity genuinely doesn't care. Now, imagine a person standing in front of that electrical generator, literally rubbing their nose on the ground, begging it to do their work, or trying to bribe it by shoving ladus and sweets into the machinery. You'd think they had completely lost their minds, right? Electricity doesn't eat sweets, and it doesn't care about your flattery. It only responds to the correct application of its laws. Treating the supreme consciousness like a human who can be flattered, pleased, or bribed with physical offerings is just as absurd. God is unbroken consciousness, deeply subtle, and completely indifferent to our material bribes.
Which brings us to Section 4, title Saudebazi aur Rishwat ki Puja. Subtitle Transactional Faith.
Let's take a really hard look at what people actually pray for today. The transactional desires that make up modern worship are vast and, honestly, pretty mundane. We pray to win a court case, to cure an illness, to pass a school exam, to have a son, to find wealth, or even to attain moksha, salvation, out of a sheer, terrifying fear of the cycle of birth and death. And we don't just ask for ourselves, do we? We ask for our kids, our relatives, our friends. Asking a supreme, incredibly subtle consciousness for these petty, physical, material favors completely misses the point of true devotion. We are basically treating faith like a marketplace transaction.
We have essentially reduced God to the level of a corrupt zamandar, like a tyrannical local landlord or a strict police inspector. Think about how people treat a corrupt official. They flatter them, they sing their praises, they offer bribes just to avoid being punished or to get a special favor. When we recite endless praises of God, saying things like, "You killed demons, you gave wealth to others, now give it to me," or when we promise to build temples or feed priests in exchange for a wish being granted, we are treating God exactly like that corrupt official. We act as if God is some homeless, hungry entity, just wandering around waiting for us to build him a house or give him a snack. Or, on the flip side, we pray out of terror, begging this all-powerful landlord not to crush us. But the reality is that God is an impartial supreme consciousness, so incredibly far beyond these physical human transactions.
And finally, we arrive at Section 5, titled Sachi Bhakti Ka Suksma Swarup, subtitle True Nature of Faith. Here is the absolute core thesis, summarized perfectly in the text: worship driven by material desires is gross. It cannot reach God. The logic here is just incredibly tight. We established earlier that the soul is subtle, right? And physical elements cannot touch it. Well, God is even more subtle than the soul. Therefore, any worship that is rooted in physical, material desires, asking for money, asking for health, offering physical food, or building physical structures as a bribe, is fundamentally gross or stula. Because it is tied to the physical realm, it simply does not have the capacity to reach the profound subtlety of the divine. You know, actually, it's kind of like trying to tune into a radio station using a toaster. The frequency is just completely wrong.
The source material concludes with this intensely powerful thought. The transaction of exchange happens at Satan's place. This buying and selling is not happening at God's shop. If you are engaging in religious practices just to get a material reward or to avoid a material punishment, you're dealing in the currency of illusion, the currency of the physical world. You might get a result based on your actions, sure, but you have to remember one crucial thing. That transaction of buying and selling favors is not happening at the shop of the divine. It begs the ultimate question for all of us. When we look at our own spiritual practices, are we seeking a true, subtle connection with the universe, or are we really just trying to strike a bargain in the dark? It's a really profound thought to sit with. Thank you so much for exploring this fascinating text with me today. And as always, keep questioning and keep learning.